There's the Greek drama that is 7 years of brutal recession and the bad soap opera that is Athens bargaining with creditors. With an end-of-month deadline to come up with 1.6 billion euros, it sure looks like time is finally running out. But this is the European Union, where final acts are averted with makeshift layover plans that postpone the inevitable until the next episode. Easy enough. On the European scale of things, 1.6 billion, you could say, is chump change. But for Athens, it could be a bridging loan too far. In fact, the left-wing leader Alexis Tsipras dispatched his finance minister without a plan, it seems, and penned a defiant editorial in the German press. His German counterpart on message before her own lawmakers ahead of the Brussels meeting. But could this be the time Angela Merkel is forced to decide between letting Greece off the hook for debts it can't repay and letting Greece default, thus sending a nation and a continent into the kind of uncharted territory that could come back to haunt one and all protagonists in this story? Today in the France 24 debate, is it exit Greece? And with us from Athens, journalist Yanis Palaiologos, author of The 13th Labor of Hercules Inside the Greek Crisis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us, political researcher George Tsogopoulos. Thank you for being with us as well from the Greek capital.
My pleasure.
Here in our studio, our Europe editor, Christophe Robit.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you.
Christophe, who firsthand covered those elections back in, what was it, January?
Yes, and we'll be in Brussels next week, and I think we're in for a very long summit, because probably we're going to discuss this, but I imagine that if there's a solution, it has to be found next week in Brussels.
All right, and with us as well, Craig Kapitas, correspondent-at-large for Courts in the Atlantic, the author of Metalmen. Welcome back to the show. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter our hashtag F24debate. Before we turn to Brussels, first stop, St. Petersburg. Alexis Tsipras jetting in on the very day those crunch talks are taking place. Both the Greek and the Russians claim there's been no request for a loan and no money is forthcoming. However, Craig Kapitas, is this a smart move on the part of Tsipras? What is he to expect out of this visit to Russia?
I am certain that he will get some kind of promises from Putin. And if he doesn't get them from Putin, I'm pretty sure he's going to go to China and probably get some promises there. And I want to correct your intro, because there's a fallacy at work in this entire discussion. You mentioned the term 1.6 billion euros. That's not the amount.
That's the amount at the end of the month.
The amount the Greeks owe is 340 billion euros, with 22 billion euros a year in annual interest. We've said this before here, we've said it many times. Greece does not have the money. Full stop. Start a new discussion. The only thing that Merkel and her cronies can do is go visit an orthopedic surgeon right now, because they've been kicking this can down the road for so long that they've all got arthritis. So every time I hear this term, 1.6 billion by the end of the month, chump change, it means nothing.
On this point, Yanis Palaiologos, let me ask you, what do you think of this strange sort of parallel universe we're witnessing this Thursday? Eurogroup finance ministers in Luxembourg and the Prime Minister in St. Petersburg.
Well, before I go into that, I'd like to mention that the previous speaker made some statements about the money that Greece owes in interest, and these statements were inaccurate. Greece doesn't pay 22 billion annually in interest. It pays much less. In fact, as a percentage of GDP in the next few years, it pays much less than the average of Eurozone countries. There are things that can and should be done for further debt relief, but the debt becomes more onerous after 2021, 2022. And it's not really the most pressing issue right now. The most pressing issue is getting lower primary surpluses, something the Europeans have agreed to. It's now up to the Greek side to find it within itself, to come to an agreement and avoid a catastrophic scenario for the country. Now, as for the visit to St. Petersburg, there's been a lot of flirtation between Greece and Russia since January. It hasn't really brought any tangible benefits for Greece. It probably doesn't help the negotiation now when you have a crucial Eurogroup to have the Prime Minister in Russia. But hopefully next week you will have heads focused as the deadline approaches and a deal will be found.
This is just sort of grandstanding in your view, Yanis.
It's an attempt by the Prime Minister to show that he has other avenues to explore in case the Europeans don't come through. But as he's seen so far, this hasn't proved to be true. There's been a lot of positive words from countries outside Europe, but no real money forthcoming, including from Russia.
George Tsogopoulos, you heard Yanis there talk about the need to find a middle ground. Where is that middle ground?
Well, this middle ground is in the sense that a political solution is right now required. And the thing is that this solution is required not only because the Greek economy right now is in a sense of a slow death, but also because a risk of a Brexit is dangerous also for the creditors of Greece and of countries which do not belong to the Eurozone, including the United States and China. In my opinion, what is much more important is not to talk only about the numbers, but about the problem of the lack of confidence. This is why no agreement has been reached so far. So the creditors of Greece sometimes ask that even if the Greek government signs an agreement, then it will not implement the required structural reforms. So it's mainly a matter of confidence, but certainly a solution needs to be found. And although many analysts and scholars are pessimistic about the future, the fact that so many meetings take place in the previous days and weeks and will take place if today the Eurogroup will fail to reach an agreement means that both parts are prepared to find a solution. And this is good for both Greece and the Eurozone and also the world economy. Now, regarding today's visit of the Greek Prime Minister to Russia, let me say that the Greek Prime Minister didn't decide yesterday to go there. It was a meeting which had been planned ahead. But we should also bear in mind that Russia and also China do not give presents to Greece. They are much more interested that Greece will stay in the Eurozone in order to continue their investment in the country. Practically for Greece, there is no alternative apart from the current bailout which is given by the European Union and the IMF.
All right. A lot of anger, by the way, on Twitter from viewers. And you mentioned there the slow death of Greece. Danilo saying, in case of euro capitulation, all these politicians sitting on the creditors' side should resign immediately. So anger on both sides, because citizens in Greece want their politicians to come up with something. Cupboards are bare, vaults are empty, and their cup runneth over. Natalie Savarakis has the story.
The clock is ticking for the Greek economy. The endless negotiations between Athens and its creditors have created a devastating climate of uncertainty, sounding the death knell for thousands of businesses. For shopkeepers Elisa and Nefi, time's up. After a decade, their two small shops on the same street are faced with closure.
I was shut down before Elisa. At the end of July, I'm shutting down because it's just not viable. Even when people do have money, they don't spend it because they're scared. They fear the outcome of the current negotiations.
Unpaid bills are piling up as customers have become a rarity. An estimate of 59 shops closed down each day.
We owe money everywhere, to the tax office, the social insurance. The bills have just piled up. I owe all this here.
Pharmacists say the cash squeeze is now contributing also to a shortage in medication.
The lack of liquidity has compounded an existing problem of medicine supply. This Spiriva, for instance, is a kind of medication that is very difficult to find. It's not that people can't eventually buy it, but to find it, we have to put up a fight and make phone calls before another pharmacist gets it.
Up until now, I've managed to buy all my medicine every month, but as to what will happen from now on, we can only wait and see.
Whatever the outcome of these negotiations will be, this is going to be a long, hot summer for Greece, and this continued lack of liquidity will only make things far worse.
Yanis Palaiologos, I've heard it described as a humanitarian crisis, what's going on in Greece. What's your reaction to that report?
Well, look, I mean, the 5 years of the memorandum and the even longer period of recession have really taken a toll. That's true. The welfare state was badly organized to begin with, and it catered more to client interest than to the needs of the poorest people, and that has gotten much worse in the last few years. I mean, more than 3/4 of Greek unemployed are long-term unemployed, and only 2% of those people get any support from the government. Almost 1/3 of Greeks are without medical insurance. Some people's pensions have been cut to zero, in fact, which is unbelievable. But I think, you know, the only way to ensure that things will get worse for all these people is for the government to insist on its red lines and not to do a deal. Because if we go in the direction of Grexit, then Greece Greek people will lose, according to some calculations, another 60% of their income. So it is absolutely imperative that the deal is struck by the end of the month.
Christophe Rabit, striking a deal, and yet, as you heard there, George Tsogopoulos say, there's a lack of confidence.
Yeah, I think confidence is really key, because at the end of the day, we're talking about, you know, about unlocking the second tranche of the last tranche of the second bailout, 7.2 billion euros. We all know that even if there is a deal, there will have to be a third bailout and a haircut. But if you don't have the confidence, if the Germans, the Finns, the French can't trust this new government, how can you go further? How can you go to the next step, which is a third bailout, possibly and preferably without the IMF, because this is an issue that has to be solved at EU level. We don't need the IMF in this. And what about a haircut? How can Angela Merkel sell to her taxpayers that they have to lose money, that Greece's debt must be reduced, possibly halved, if there is no confidence? That is why I think the game of Mr. Varoufakis particularly is very dangerous.
Craig Kapitas?
Again, the current European fable, which could have been written by Aesop, here is that Greece is going to pay back this money. The creditors are giving them discounts on their loans, real market rate, 22 billion.
But hang on a sec. We've been hearing in the last week that there was the possibility of side deals, of the Europeans. This is how it's been spun. Sure. For instance, in, what was it, Frankfurter Allgemeine am Sonntag, quoting a source as saying that the Europeans were ready for reduction in defense spending, which would have made a deal possible, but it was the IMF that shot it down.
We're so far, look. Natalie's piece that you just ran out was terrific, and it really showed what the situation is there. You know, I have family there that can't get drugs. You saw some of them on TV. There's people there who can't get food. Greece is turning into Albania, if not in the bad old days. And everyone here in the ECB in Brussels and in Luxembourg are looking at these short-term solutions. Again, kick the can down the road. Come up with the 1.6 billion and all will be right. Chris, you're absolutely right. It's a question of confidence. People have to start looking long-term here. Long-term. And long-term means, oh, shock horror, let's just forget about the debt. Let's write it off and start with a clean slate.
How can you come to an agreement and forget about the debt if you don't have assurances from the current government that they're ready to put the house in order? That's the real question.
Which begs the question, are there any competent politicians left in Greece?
Very good question.
All right, I will put it to the Greeks, I'll begin with you, George Tsogopoulos. How's Syriza doing, this new party to government?
Well, let me start by saying that theoretically this new Greek government has a great opportunity because it is a government with new politicians who have not governed before. And this means that if they want and if they show the appropriate political will, they can possibly efficiently deal with problems like corruption and tax evasion in Greece. So far, we haven't seen any signs, but if they have the opportunity to govern and to, after reaching an agreement in these days, then we might be able to realize whether they can carry on and they can implement these structural reforms. It is important to say that also the European creditors of Greece are prepared to help this government only if this government practically shows the political will to proceed. The problem with the Syriza party is that its mentality, its ideology is against privatizations, it is against reducing the public sector, and from this moment it's really difficult to cooperate at the European level. We have seen, for example, that one of the priorities of the government was to reopen the national broadcaster of Greece, while at the same time it is delaying the important privatizations. These elements are not positive, and it is here where the disagreements will be between the government and the people. I think the government deserves an opportunity. You cannot judge the performance in only 4 months and a half.
Very briefly, Yanis Palaiologos, is Alexis Tsipras learning fast enough?
No, it doesn't seem like he is. Unfortunately, Syriza seems to combine stale old left ideology with traditional Greek-style clientelism, and also a kind of bunker mentality that sees enemies everywhere and is willing to undermine already battered institutions in Greece because it feels that they are manned by individuals who oppose them. The most recent and blatant example being the governor of the Bank of Greece. And the unfortunate thing is that we're seeing that as the negotiation continues, instead of there being trust built and confidence between the two sides, you see greater mutual recrimination. So I think the omens at this point are very bad, and things look quite pessimistic.
All right, we'll see if there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Despite it all, when we come back, you're watching the France 24 debate.
Cut. We cannot leave. We are in a big dead end. We love Europe. We want to be inside Europe. But unfortunately, it's like they are pushing us and kicking us. It's like telling us to get out.
If negotiations fail, it's not the government's fault. They tried really hard. They took steps behind from where they stood. But we still support them.